All right. 1931, Frankenstein. Let's discuss it. All right. Directed by James Whale, starring Boris Karloff. I tried watching this before a few times over the years and never got through it without dozing off. This time, though, I still dozed off, but I finished it. But that was more due to the fact that I couldn't sleep last night. So I had been up for a while, and the film wasn't boring. If that's what you're wondering, it wasn't. But so, what's up with this film? You know what? I have to. This is one. What I noticed off the top. There's something about older movies in terms of their straightforwardness. There is not a lot of buildup to when things start, like the inciting incident or whatever it is. You're pretty much thrown into the start of the film. So the first shot of the film is a funeral, and at this funeral, you have Frankenstein, Henry Frankenstein, and you have his assistant, played by Dwight Frye, who is, if you've seen Dracula, he's Renfield in that movie. He's also he's in a couple other Universal pictures, which is interesting and kind of cool. Like there's something about those early days where you had a handful of films that recycled actors in different roles, whatever it is, and that's kind of neat. But I feel like if they're good actors, like why do you need to find anybody else? I mean, you don't really need to. A good actor is a good actor. So, and he's not the only one. Obviously, Boris Karloff, who plays Frankenstein's monster. He is also the Mummy. He's in the Black Cat. He's in a few other movies as well, as is the actor who plays Van Helsing and Dracula. He's in this movie as a different character. He's in also another Universal Pictures situation. So that's kind of cool, the recycling of those actors. So at this funeral, Frankenstein and his assistant are there hiding, waiting for everything to be done so they can dig up the body and use it for Frankenstein's experiments. And the straightforwardness of that is it's almost jarring, because movies today have a more deliberate buildup to things like that. Like you might have seen Henry Frankenstein at university, and everything that's revealed in this film in dialogue, like backstory pieces that we don't see, would have been shown in a film made today. And it's just interesting noticing that way of telling a story. The early films seem like they really do a good job of trimming out all the fat. Like there's absolutely, you get the sense that there's everything that's in the movie is absolutely essential to the story. No unnecessary story beats or things that feel unnecessary is included. And you get that sense based on how it's edited. And even if it's a insert that's like 5 seconds, a 30-second thing, or 60-second scene or whatever it is, they're purposely put in there, which is, every story should have that. But there are some films we watch today that certain things might feel too long, or certain sequences might not feel necessary. But the olden days films don't really have that problem, and this is one. It's one of those films. I appreciate the bluntness of storytelling. It's like the credits roll and you're in the mix right now, go. And then everything is just going, and there's no real there's not a lot of room, breathing room for stuff. There are a couple more introspective, reflective sequences regarding the Frankenstein's monster. And while we're talking about him, I have to say, Boris Karloff obviously a lot of those old school actors were fantastic. Karloff imbues the monster with such emotion, and without communicating a lot of dialogue. Obviously, he can't speak, so there's a lot of grunting and things. And even for how it's done in the body language and in the grunts, you get a sense of the basic feeling of he's just trying to stay alive and not be attacked. He's just trying to sort of just exist. He didn't ask to be created, and yet he's there, and he's immediately met with, not positive stuff. So, yeah, Karloff does an amazing job of giving us a sort of full range of a performance without a lot. Like he's had to perform the role just strictly with his body language and grunting, facial expressions and things. So that's cool. That's amazing. And probably he's probably Karloff is probably the standout of the film. It's just he's just probably one of the more memorable aspects of the situation. Although I will say that Colin Clive, who plays Henry Frankenstein, he's the other anchor of this film. I think, granted, because you spend more time, you see him more often, you spend more time with him. He does a good job at playing the extremes, really. Like you see him at the beginning of the film where he's sort of, he feels kind of erratic and deranged almost, singularly obsessed with creating life. And I think the arc from that to when he's sort of more normal, preparing for his wedding, and he's back to his more neutral levels of engagement. It's cool to see those two extremes be played, and ultimately he has to when he volunteers to be a part of the search party to find the monster when things get out of hand, and the monster escapes and is unintentionally terrorizing people. He's got to do the tough job of finding his creation and destroying it. And I think ultimately what you have is again, the simplicity. I mentioned this with the Dracula review, and that is the simplicity of the story does not take away from the effectiveness of it. You have a man who is driven, and to the point to where it's everything else in his life sort of is secondary, and he's pushed himself so far that it takes the consequences of his actions for him to see, he messed up, and he's got to try to sort of rectify that. That is a very relatable story. That said, when you bring in the monster, that is also very relatable too, and how he's not actually really doing anything wrong. He has no concept really of what is right or wrong. He's thrust into this new existence, and immediately is overwhelmed, obviously, with a lot of the energy that's being thrown at him. He doesn't know anything about the world. He doesn't know anything about social constructs, nothing about anything that we know, how we understand society to be, and how unfortunate for him to have been brought into this world and have to sort of navigate life and stuff, and be, he's just a big lumbering, entity that unfortunately ends up, hurting people, and but then and the way that's portrayed is actually it's actually quite touching in the way too, because you know that like if he hurt somebody unwittingly, and you know when he's hurt somebody when he's trying to defend himself, he's not trying to kill people because he's just trying to terrorize people. He's been attacked from his first moments of sort of interacting with people, and so he wants to just to not be attacked like anybody, you know. So that's what you got going on with this movie. And those two stories, between Frankenstein and the monster, hold there's a glue that really keeps this that holds the story together. You're really experiencing the story from their perspective. There's other stuff too, what's going on with the impending stuff with the wedding and Frankenstein's father and his fiance, and the professor and all the other stuff. Those things really are like padding. They're not really what the story is about. You really have Frankenstein and the monster. That's what this whole situation is about. And while we're there, I think the best thing, the coolest thing I think about this movie, the coolest sequence, I have to highlight this because I thought it was really cool, because it reminded me of something that you would see in a modern type of film. And not just like a horror film, but you'd see this in sort of any sort of film that has a confrontation between protagonist and an antagonist. Where this is interesting though, because this film really doesn't have an antagonist. The monster is sort of billed as the antagonist, but really Henry Frankenstein and the monster, you almost have two protagonists, right? And and the conflict really comes from Henry's arc, going from mad scientist to, hey, I messed up, I'm gonna go back to be a regular dude, right? And then having to confront the results of his experiments. He's made some mistakes, he's got to go and correct that. And then you have that's one conflict piece. You have the monster, who is, again, he's just trying to figure things out. And that is a compelling arc too. The conflict comes from as he's trying to figure things out, people are getting hurt in the process, and that has to be changed. That has to stop. And so they're really the two antagonists, or two protagonists. And the antagonist is really just sort of the situation, really. I don't know if that makes any sense. That's what it feels like to me as I'm trying to voice it and trying to explain what it reads like to me. And then of course the villagers and stuff that, that's the, that's again, other types of outside conflict that serves to add to the drama of it. The wedding and all of this stuff almost seems like secondary stuff. Like, oh, we got to cancel the wedding, all that. That's not really what it's about. But that's what you have going on. But I mentioned this, what I wanted to share was the climactic confrontation between Henry Frankenstein and the monster in the tower building, the windmill building, whatever. This is after they've had a couple struggles, whatever, in the mountains, and the monster jacks up Frankenstein and takes him to the tower windmill place, and he's knocked out. But then he wakes up, and he's trying to get away. Frankenstein's trying to get away from his creation. And there's a shot in there, or there are two shots really, that is it was like it reminded me of Heat. If you've seen Heat, the climactic confrontation between Al Pacino's character and Robert De Niro's character at the airport, when it's a cat and mouse, there's a chase going on, and with the understanding, the audience goes into that whole scene knowing that one of them is not going to make it out of that situation alive, or they're just not going to make it out in a way that is how they want. One of them's going to jail or dying, or that's what it is. Or they're both going to die, whatever. right. And how that sequence plays out is a lot like how it felt like to me to see Henry Frankenstein go up against his monster as he's actually trying to get away. He's not trying to fight the monster. He can't win that fight. So, but there's two shots in there they're inside the windmill place, and there's gears and stuff going and turning and stuff. And there are two shots where the camera is positioned from either of their perspectives, and you see gears turning, and you're seeing their faces through the gears. So it's like bars and things moving around. It's really effective. And they're looking at each other through those bars, and it almost seems to communicate other stuff that's not on screen there. And no words, right? No, you can't, because they can't really communicate with language, how we, with using their words. So, but what feels like to me is communicated is like, yo, this life or death. It's either you or me. Either you're gonna kill me. If I'm Henry Frankenstein, you are gonna kill me, or I'm getting out of here, and you're gonna die. Somehow the village is gonna get you. One of us is gonna die. We're not gonna make it out again. Like Pete, either one of us is gonna die, or we're both gonna die. And it's really effective in how it communicates the tension in that sequence, because you're genuinely worried for Henry Frankenstein, because he's on the cusp. He's about to get married. He's just sort of getting his life back to normal. His fiance was terrorized, whatever it is. The villagers, there's a whole bunch are tripping. There is a whole bunch of pressure, right? So it's sort of like this powder keg. It's gonna blow, and if there's no way it ends happily. At least going in, you're feeling like, it's anybody's guess how it's gonna go. But I loved that sequence. That was really cool. And of course, Frankenstein doesn't get away unscathed. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to spoil it, but I will say that there's some aspects of it that don't feel believable in the, again, you got to suspend your disbelief or whatever it is. Because, it doesn't feel believable, and then it could feel believable too, because how things happen. You look at the distance from the top of that windmill place to the ground, and it's not that great. So somebody could survive, a fall from that height. But if you were thrown over, I don't know. Well, you might have some limbs broken and stuff, and maybe that's probably what we're dealing with. But regardless of that, it doesn't hurt the overall experience of the movie. I'll say that. The other thing I'll say is I want to talk about the very end for a second. This goes back to what I mentioned earlier about the directness, the bluntness of storytelling, and how there's not a lot of fluff or leeway in the story. So the very end of the film, you have the sort of housekeeper people of Frankenstein's family home. And they're going to offer Henry Frankenstein some wine or something like that as he recovers from his injuries. And his father opens the door and comes out and talks to them. And he gives like a little toast. And you see Henry in the bed. You don't know, you assume he's okay, but you don't really know the how he is, and you don't know anything about, you don't see his fiance anymore. You don't know whether or not the wedding's still happening or anything like that. But his dad gives a toast, and then the movie, that's it. Then you see the end. That's it. Which is, on its own, it's not funny. But what I find funny about it is, those old movies, you have characters say a line or something like that, and the movie is just over immediately. There's no extended credits. Obviously, you might see one card of credits, and that's it. You have the closing music, and that's all you get. So I was just like, dang, that's okay, straight up. So there's no, like, in another movie, you might see that same sequence, and then you might have another sequence after that showing the wedding, showing us definitively whether or not Henry survived his ordeal with the monster, or what that looks like. But it's just funny how you don't get that. But you just know he's okay. You assume he's okay, and the movie's over and the monster's just done. But I want to talk about that for a second. The Frankenstein's monster, and how you do feel for him. I did. I definitely felt for him. You don't feel like he's a villain. It's not like you don't feel like he's a villain like Dracula's a villain. You don't really lose that much sleep over Dracula when Dracula doesn't make it out of the situation. But you do feel, and you just go, that was a formidable villain, and he got his just desserts, and that's what's up. Like, that's what you're supposed to get. But with Frankenstein, you don't feel that. You just go, dang, man, he was just trying to live and try to learn stuff, and he was learning, and it's unfortunate that he it didn't work out for him. At least if you take the sequels out of the picture, which is what I'm doing. I'm not looking at the fact that Frankenstein we do see him in other movies, whatever it is. Skip all that. If you take this as a one-off and look at it as a cautionary tale against sort of the hubris of man trying to play God, and how there's always some sort of, you see this in Jurassic Park, you see this in things like Westworld or anything like that, where, man is getting too big for his britches, and he's trying to, prove that he can go beyond, do more. And that's cool. Nothing's wrong with ambition and, having goals and dreams and stuff like that. But there is something to be said for the ethics of Frankenstein's moves. And I think he sees, the error of his ways and has to go try to correct that. So on one hand, the film is a cautionary tale, but also is how I see it. But also it's also just a really human story. It's a humanizing story. The monster is actually quite human, and in a lot of ways more human and more pure than anyone in the picture. He's the most pure character, next to Little Maria, and I think really he's purer than her because he's so naive to the world. He knows so little about everything, that makes him. He really is like real baby steps is what he needed to understand things a little bit more about the world he was brought into. Which poor Maria, like that was such a second aside real quick I have to say about that. There was such a beautiful interaction between the two of them. And that's the one thing, if you didn't feel for Frankenstein's monster before that, you definitely feel for the monster after the interaction with Little Maria. Such a beautiful, even I found myself so affected by, it's a brief sequence, but it was like, oh, look at this sweet little girl. And, she wants to, hey, come play with me. And she's giving him, it's really beautiful. And that makes that sequence all the more tragic, for her and also for, the monster. Halloween season we're still in the mix. So if you have space, I recommend watching it. In fact, go through the Universal Monsters situation. Just watch them all. I'm planning on. I don't know if I'm going to make it, but my plan is to sort of get all the main ones in by the end of the month. So we're going to see how that works. We're going to see what's up. But I enjoyed it. I have my heart is touched by the story. I was riveted. I was thrilled, and I was moved. I was almost crying. I had some tears coming up a little bit. So it was, this stuff is it's worth your time. If you're a film head, again, looking at it just from a purely film history perspective, check it out. It's cool. Frankenstein is a good one to watch. Yeah, so I think that's it. Thank you for watching this video. I'm coming on back with some more movies. I saw a couple other movies just in the last couple of days. I'm excited I have to shift my list now because I had other things I was going to talk about, and now I want to talk about these ones too. So I got to figure out which ones I want to do first and drop those. So that's on the way. Stay tuned. But in the meantime, it's Thursday, and you know what that means. It's Law and Order. So I got to watch my shows. Got to get on that. So, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you back here later.